The US presidential election is just over a week away. Both candidates are making a final push for votes. The Republican candidate, Donald Trump, has held a rally in his home state of New York. Thousands of people gathered at Madison Square Garden in Manhattan for one of the highest profile events in his campaign. There was a long list of guests who included Speaker of the House Mike Johnson, billionaire Elon Musk, and Mr. Trump's running mate JD Vance. There, he made one of his final pitches to voters. Our senior North America correspondent Gary O'Donoghue was watching and sent this report.
An iconic venue in Donald Trump's hometown. He's wanted to hold a rally here for years.
Good evening, New York City!
And a rare appearance from the former First Lady. She's largely steered clear of this campaign. For the candidate himself, the focus was on his opponent.
Kamala, you're fired, get out!
And on the main themes.
I will end inflation. I will stop the invasion of criminals coming into our country. And I will bring back the American dream.
Donald Trump had lined up his favourite famous supporters for this rally, from an old wrestler to the eldest son to the world's richest man, all of whom echoed his central message on immigration.
I will rescue every city and town that has been invaded and conquered. And we will put these vicious and bloodthirsty criminals in jail. We're going to kick them the hell out of our country as fast as possible.
As we enter the final week of campaigning, the polls are telling us that there is only 1 or 2 percentage points dividing Donald Trump and Kamala Harris in those key swing states. No one knows at this stage how this is going to go. Gary O'Donoghue, BBC News at Madison Square Garden in New York.
Meanwhile, Vice President Kamala Harris was in Pennsylvania, one of the battleground states that could decide how this election plays out. The Democratic nominee has been making the rounds through the city of Philadelphia, where she attended a church service, stopped by a bookshop, a youth basketball facility and a Puerto Rican restaurant. Ms. Harris later held a rally to cap off the day where she brought up the conflict in the Middle East, a key issue to voters who are unhappy with the Biden administration's response to the Israel-Gaza war.
I want to talk about Gaza for a minute, okay? We can and we must seize this opportunity to end this war and bring the hostages home. And I will do everything in my power to meet that end.
My colleague Sumi Somaskanda in Washington has the details on the latest polls.
We've seen the latest polling coming in from our partners here in the U.S., CBS News, and they have shown that on the national level, Kamala Harris has a 1-point percentage lead over Donald Trump. And in those critical 7 battleground states, they are tied. It is a dead heat. And remember, it is those battleground states that matter the most. And that is why we're seeing both candidates, both Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, out on the campaign trail trying to drum up as much support as possible, particularly among some of those persuadable voters, some of those people who might not have cast a ballot at all in the last election, hoping to somehow gather enough votes together to be able to win. It is important to say that both of these candidates gave us a bit of an idea of what their closing message might be. So Donald Trump, you heard in that report from our colleague Gary there, speaking about economy, immigration, about crime. These are themes that we continue to hear from Donald Trump on the campaign trail. And he painted a fundamentally dark picture of where the country is right now. He talked about sinister and corrupt forces underway in the U.S., and he used this phrase, the enemy within. He's used this to talk about what he calls the radical Marxists, left Marxists in this country, but he's talked about his own democratic political opponents as enemies, more dangerous, as he has said, than Iran or Russia or China, foreign adversaries. So that is a message that Donald Trump doubled down on today. A few months ago, or a month or two ago, we heard this joyful warrior message from Kamala Harris talking about what she would do on abortion and on the economy. In the last week or so, we have seen that shift fairly significantly, where she's talking about Donald Trump as a threat to democracy, as a fascist, as she called him, and as someone who would rule as a dictator, as she said on day one, referring to a message we'd heard from Donald Trump. So really getting a sense with 8 days left of what the closing messages are going to be.
Sumi Somaskanda in Washington. With 8 days to go, the polls are still very tight. If you draw out the overall trends rather than the individual points, In the national polls, Vice President Kamala Harris's lead has been slipping and is now down to around a single point. But the national vote share won't determine the winner. Let's turn to the 7 battleground states that could be decisive in this election. Mr. Trump's poll leads in North Carolina, Arizona and Georgia are between 1 and 2 points. Other states like Nevada, Wisconsin and Pennsylvania are even tighter, but none of the leads we're seeing are bigger than the margins of error that come with all polls.